Piero Barone, one of the voices of Il Volo, the man whose talent has filled arenas and brought millions to tears with his music. At just 32, his story has taken a turn that no fan could have ever expected. What could possibly have happened to someone so young, so full of promise, and so deeply loved? The tragedy of Piero Barone is beyond devastating, and today we're going to uncover the truth. Welcome to the channel, friends. If this is your first time here, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because this is where we dive deep into the untold stories of the world's most beloved stars, the victories, the heartbreaks, the secrets, and the truths that change the way we see them forever. And if you've been here before, you know what's coming. Stay with me, because this story will leave you shocked. So let's dive in. Piero Barone wasn't born into fame. He wasn't handed a microphone and told he would one day stand on the grandest stages in the world. No, his story began in Nero, a small town in Sicily, Italy, a place where tradition ran deep, where music wasn't just entertainment, but a way of life. His family, like so many in small-town Italy, lived with simple values, hard work, respect, and love, and in that simplicity, a voice was born. From a very young age, Piero stood out. Not because he was trying to, but because he couldn't help it. His voice wasn't just strong, it was powerful, rich, and carried with it an emotion that most adults couldn't even touch. Imagine being just a child, yet when you opened your mouth to sing, people turned, people cried, people felt. That was Piero. And maybe you, watching this right now, know what it feels like to have a gift that makes you different. Sometimes it's a blessing, sometimes it's a burden. For Piero, it was both. His early years were filled with local performances, singing in small events, churches, and festivals. His family believed in him, supported him, and encouraged him to chase his dream. But dreams like his weren't easy. Italy is a country of music. Everyone wants to sing, everyone wants to be heard. Standing out meant giving everything, and Piero was willing to sacrifice it all. Then came the moment that changed everything. Ti lascio una canzone, the Italian talent show where Piero, alongside Gianluca Ginibili and Ignazio Bichetto, would first come together. Individually, they were powerful. Together, they were unstoppable. And just like that, Il Volo was born. Three boys with voices that felt like they had been carved from history itself. But here's the part fans didn't see. Behind the lights, behind the applause, Piero was under immense pressure. Imagine being so young, suddenly thrust into fame, carrying not just your own dream, but the expectations of millions. He had to be perfect. His voice had to be flawless every night. His image had to be pristine. And while fans saw the polished man on stage, Piero himself was often wrestling with the weight of it all. Il Volo skyrocketed to international fame. Concerts across the globe, albums topping charts, collaborations with legends. And through it all, Piero's voice became the anchor, steady, commanding, unforgettable. But the tragedy of being exceptional is that people forget you're human. They see the perfection, not the pain. Now, let me ask you, how many of you have ever felt invisible behind your own success? Everyone praises you, everyone claps for you, but nobody asks if you're okay. That was Piero's reality. And this is where the cracks began to show. At 32, what fans are now learning about Piero Barone is not just devastating, it's shattering. Because behind the music, behind the suit, and the spotlight is a man who has been carrying struggles far heavier than anyone could have imagined. And as we move deeper into this story, I promise you, the truth will shock you. Because what really happened to Piero Barone at 32 is more than a headline, more than a rumor. It's a tragedy that proves no matter how high you rise, no one is immune to heartbreak. Stay with me, because in the next part of this story, we'll pull back the curtain on what Piero was truly going through, the battles that nearly broke him, and why fans everywhere are calling this the most devastating chapter of his life. So here we are, moving deeper into the story. We've seen how Piero Barone's journey began, how his voice lifted him from the small streets of Nero to the grandest stages in the world. But behind the applause, behind the lights, there was a storm quietly brewing, one that fans never fully saw until it became impossible to hide. Let's pause for a second. When you think about success, what comes to mind? Money, fame, admiration, endless opportunities? Most people imagine it as the ultimate reward. But the truth, and you've probably felt this in your own life, is that success doesn't always equal happiness. Sometimes success builds walls instead of bridges. And for Piero, those walls grew higher with each passing year. Il Volo was more than just a group. It was a phenomenon. Everywhere they went, fans screamed their names, cried at their songs, begged for autographs. The trio became ambassadors of Italian music, carrying opera and classical crossover into a modern world. But being in the spotlight 24/7 takes its toll. Every word you say, every move you make, every note you sing is judged. And while Gianluca and Ignacio shared that burden, Piero's personality, disciplined, serious, perfection-driven, meant he carried it differently. He pushed himself harder than anyone else. Long hours of vocal training, strict diets, endless rehearsals. To many, he looked like the strong one, the one who could never break. But here's where the tragedy begins. Those who look the strongest on the outside are often fighting the deepest battles within. Piero struggled with identity. Who was he outside of Il Volo? Was he just the tenor with glasses, the steady presence in the group? Or was there more to him? Fame has a strange way of boxing people in. And at 32, Piero found himself asking questions that fame couldn't answer. And then there was the pressure of perfection. If you've ever had to live up to expectations from family, friends, society, or even yourself, then you know how exhausting it is. For Piero, one wrong note wasn't just a mistake, it felt like failure. Fans saw the flawless performances, but they didn't see the hours of self-criticism, the nights where he replayed concerts in his head, focusing only on the flaws nobody else even noticed. But the tragedy doesn't stop there. Like many artists, Piero also wrestled with loneliness. Imagine traveling the world, performing in front of thousands, and then going back to a hotel room alone. Yes, he had his bandmates. Yes, he had fans who adored him. But adoration is not the same as connection. Fame gives you millions of admirers, but it can take away genuine intimacy. And for Piero, that emptiness grew louder as the years went by. And maybe you felt that too, being surrounded by people, yet still feeling completely alone. At 32, these struggles began to surface more visibly. Interviews showed him smiling, but fans with a sharp eye noticed the weariness behind it. His once bright energy seemed dimmer, his words more careful, his presence quieter. And when rumors began to spread, whispers of exhaustion, of health struggles, of personal heartbreaks, fans didn't want to believe it. Because how could someone so young, so gifted, already be facing tragedy? But the truth is, tragedy doesn't wait for age. It doesn't care if you're 32 or 72. It comes when it comes. There were whispers about stress-related health issues. Whispers about emotional breakdowns hidden behind closed doors. Whispers that the very gift that made Piero a star was also the weight pulling him down. And here's where it gets interactive. I want to ask you watching right now, have you ever loved something so much that it also hurt you? That's what music was for Piero. His voice was his blessing and his burden. The very thing that gave him a life millions could only dream of was also the thing that drained him, broke him, and left him vulnerable. By 32, the tragedy was no longer just whispers. It became clear that Piero's journey was marked by struggles deeper than anyone could have imagined. Fans began noticing cancellations, rescheduled appearances, and moments where he seemed distant even on stage. But let's be clear, this wasn't weakness. This was humanity. And that's what makes this story so devastating. Because when we think of stars like Piero, we forget they're human too. We put them on pedestals, we expect them to shine endlessly, and when they falter, we call it tragedy. But in reality, it's life. And yet, for Piero Barone, life at 32 brought challenges no one was ready to face. Because what happened next, the revelations, the heartbreak, the struggles that fans would eventually discover, took this from being just another story of a celebrity under pressure to a tragedy that shook the very foundation of Il Volo's fan base worldwide. And as we move into the final chapter of this journey, we'll uncover exactly what those revelations were, how they broke the hearts of millions, and why, even in tragedy, Piero Barone's story remains unforgettable. Stay with me because part 3 will reveal everything. So, here we are. We've traveled through Piero Barone's rise, his struggles, his quiet battles, and the whispers of a tragedy that was unfolding behind the curtain. But now it's time to confront the part of the story that fans around the world couldn't ignore, the shocking truth of what happened at 32 that left millions heartbroken. And I want to ask you something before we dive in. Have you ever felt like you knew someone, truly knew them, only to realize there were entire parts of their life you never saw? That's exactly what happened to fans of Piero. They adored the polished performances, the graceful interviews, the carefully crafted public image. But when the truth began to surface, it shattered that illusion and reminded everyone that even legends bleed. Piero's tragedy at 32 was not one single event, but a storm of challenges that collided all at once. His health, his emotional well-being, and his sense of purpose all came under fire. Fans who saw him smiling on stage didn't know that offstage, he was grappling with exhaustion so intense it sometimes left him bedridden. Whispers spoke of stress-related heart issues, of fainting spells, of long nights hooked up to machines just to keep his energy steady. And then there was the emotional toll. Fame had given him everything, yet taken away almost as much. While Il Volo celebrated sold-out tours and chart-topping albums, Piero's personal life was fragile. Relationships became harder to maintain, friendships drifted apart, and the loneliness grew sharper. There were reports of him breaking down privately, confessing that the very gift of his voice, the thing the world celebrated, felt like a chain around his soul. It's easy to cheer for success, but we often forget the sacrifices it demands. And Piero, at just 32, was already paying the price. Now let's talk about the breaking point. Every story has one. That moment where the hidden becomes visible, where the whispers become undeniable. For Piero, it came during a performance that fans would later call both unforgettable and haunting. On stage, under the bright lights, he faltered. His voice, usually flawless, cracked, and his body trembled. At first, the audience thought it was just a momentary lapse, but those close to him knew it was something far deeper. That night, backstage, Piero collapsed. And though he would recover physically, emotionally the weight was crushing. News began to spread. At first, only small outlets covered it, but soon the story exploded. Is Piero Barone sick? What's happening with Il Volo's tenor? Headlines popped up everywhere. Fans flooded social media with prayers, with desperate messages of support, with theories and fears. And when the truth came out, that Piero was battling both severe physical exhaustion and emotional turmoil, the world was stunned. Because how could someone so young, so talented, so seemingly untouchable be so vulnerable? The tragedy was not just his suffering, but the way it exposed the harsh reality of fame. Here was a man who had given everything to his art, who had carried the weight of perfection on his shoulders, and yet, when he broke, the world still demanded more. It was devastating because it showed us all how fragile even the strongest can be. Fans recall the moment Il Volo released his statement. It was carefully worded, filled with gratitude and hope, but between the lines, the pain was obvious. They admitted Piero needed time, that his health and well-being were the priority. Concerts were postponed, interviews canceled. And for the first time, fans saw Il Volo not as untouchable stars, but as human beings trying to protect one of their own. The reaction was overwhelming. Millions poured their hearts out online, sharing stories of how Piero's voice had saved them through their own struggles. Some wrote letters, some recorded messages, others organized vigils and tributes. Entire fan clubs united in prayer, holding on to hope that their tenor would rise again. But alongside the love came sorrow, sorrow that someone so gifted was enduring so much pain. And here's the part that makes it even more heartbreaking. Piero himself, even in his lowest moments, still thought about his fans. He was reported to have said, "They gave me everything. I don't want to let them down." Even when he was drained, broken, and struggling, his heart remained tied to the people who believed in him. That kind of devotion is rare, and it's why his story cuts so deep. At 32, Piero Barone's tragedy wasn't just his own. It belonged to everyone who had ever been touched by his music. Because when you love an artist, their pain becomes your pain. Their struggles echo inside you. And millions felt that ache when they realized their idol was not indestructible, but human. But let's not forget, tragedy doesn't erase legacy. It amplifies it. And in Piero's case, his struggles reminded fans of what truly matters. Not just the perfect high notes, but the imperfect, fragile man behind them. His story became more than music. It became a mirror, showing us that even legends battle demons. And here's where I want to turn this back to you. Think about the times you've pushed yourself too hard, the times you wore a smile while crumbling inside. Think about how often we expect others, especially public figures, to be strong for us, forgetting they need strength too. Isn't it heartbreaking that it often takes tragedy for us to see the human behind the spotlight? As the world continues to support Piero, the lessons from his story remain powerful. His tragedy teaches us compassion. It teaches us to look beyond the surface, to recognize that even the brightest stars can feel the darkest nights. And it teaches us that sometimes the greatest act of strength is admitting vulnerability. At 32, Piero Barone's tragedy shook fans worldwide. It was beyond devastating, not just because of what he endured, but because it reminded us of a truth we often ignore, that behind every legend is a fragile human being, fighting battles we may never fully see. And as fans continue to sing his songs, as Il Volo continues to carry on, his story will forever remain a bittersweet chapter, one that broke hearts, but also united millions in love, empathy, and hope. So as we close this journey, let's honor him not just for his voice, but for his humanity, because that's the part of Piero Barone that will live forever. And now I'll leave you with this question. When you think of your heroes, do you see the legend or do you see the human?